Hi, it's Helhin Hart. My new story is right here. Enjoy watching.
My husband's mother booked a table at the most exclusive restaurant in Greenville, South Carolina, a place with a 6-week wait list and a $48 appetizer minimum. She told everyone it was to celebrate my husband's promotion. When I showed up, the hostess told me there was no reservation under my name. And behind me, in that sweet poison voice I'd learned to recognize over 3.5 years of marriage, I heard Angelina Landry say, "Maybe a cheap bar fits you better, sweetheart." She said it loud enough for 2 nearby tables to hear. She said it with a smile, and she had absolutely no idea that she was standing in a restaurant I co-owned. My name is June Salinas. I'm 31 years old, and I work as a purchasing coordinator for a regional food distribution company here in Greenville. That's a fancy way of saying I negotiate bulk contracts for restaurants across the Carolinas. Everything from produce pricing to meat suppliers to the brand of olive oil on your table. It's not glamorous, but I'm good at it, and it pays well. And I learned the business before I learned long division. See, I grew up in Odessa, Texas, helping my grandparents run a little place called Rosie's Diner. My grandmother, Rosie Salinas, opened that diner in 1983 and ran it for 41 years straight. She taught me how to calculate food cost margins on a paper napkin. She taught me how to spot a dishonest supplier by the way he avoided eye contact when quoting prices. And she taught me the one rule I've carried my entire adult life: always keep one account that's just yours. Grandma Rosie kept a savings account at a credit union in Midland that even my grandfather didn't know about. Not because she didn't trust him, because she trusted herself more. I met Dominic Landry at a friend's backyard cookout 4 years ago. He was 30, working in commercial insurance, and had the kind of laugh that made you want to be in on the joke. We got married 7 months later. Fast, I know. But when you grow up watching your grandparents finish each other's sentences after 50 years, you think you know what love looks like. Turns out, love looks different when your mother-in-law is Angelina Landry. The first time I met Angelina, she looked me up and down like she was appraising a used appliance. She asked what my family did. I told her about Rosie's Diner, the biscuits, the regulars, the Christmas tamales my grandmother made every December. Angelina tilted her head and said, "Oh, how quaint. Dominic has always had a soft spot for strays." Now, the Landrys own 4 dry cleaning locations across Greenville County. Good business, solid income. I did the math once. I do that, it's a professional habit, and estimated their net revenue at maybe $140,000 a year before taxes. Comfortable, not wealthy. But Angelina carries herself like she descends from Southern royalty. She wears pearls to the grocery store. She once corrected a waiter's French pronunciation at an Applebee's. An Applebee's, I still think about that. Over 3.5 years, Angelina ran a quiet, methodical campaign to remind me and everyone around us that I didn't belong. She suggested I wear something different to the country club brunch. She forgot to include me in the family holiday card 3 years in a row. She introduced me to her neighbor as Dominic's first wife, then laughed and said she was kidding. At Thanksgiving last year, she told Aunt Paula that I probably married Dominic because Landry looks better on a mortgage application than Salinas. People laughed. Dominic was in the other room. I was in the hallway holding a sweet potato casserole I'd spent 3 hours on, and I just stood there feeling my face burn. And Dominic? He's not a bad man. I want to be clear about that. He loves me. But he has never, not once in 3.5 years, told his mother to stop. He squeezes my hand under the table. He changes the subject. He says, "That's just how she is," on the drive home. He's a man who was raised by a woman who paid for his college, his first car, his apartment deposit. Every gift came with an invisible receipt, and Angelina has been collecting on those receipts for 33 years. 3 weeks ago, Angelina called me with an invitation. A family dinner, she said, to celebrate Dominic's big promotion at work. Her voice was warm, friendly even, and I should have known right then. Because Angelina Landry has never once been warm to me without a reason. The restaurant she chose? Bellwood, the most exclusive table in Greenville. My restaurant. Before we continue, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I read every single one. Thank you so much for your support. Now back to the worst dinner invitation of my life. Here's what I didn't tell you yet. 22 months before that dinner, I made the biggest financial decision of my life. My friend Nina Cavallo, a chef I'd met through my distribution work, brilliant, stubborn, the kind of woman who argues with her own recipes, came to me with a business plan. She wanted to open an upscale Southern fusion restaurant in downtown Greenville. She had the talent. She needed a partner who understood the money side. I invested $52,000. That was 8 years of disciplined saving. I'd been putting away between $400 and $600 a month since I was 23, straight into a high-yield savings account I never touched. Plus the inheritance my grandmother left me when she passed. Grandma Rosie didn't leave me a fortune. She left me $21,000 and a laminated index card that said, "Make it grow." So I did. Bellwood opened 12 months ago. Nina became the public face. Every magazine feature, every Instagram post, every best new restaurant in the upstate list. I stayed invisible. My name isn't on the website. It's not in the press. I handle the finances, supplier contracts, bookkeeping, inventory systems. The same work I watched my grandmother do at Rosie's Diner, just with nicer tablecloths. I'm what's called a silent partner. And I was silent on purpose. Because here's the thing about being married to Dominic Landry. Anything Dominic knows, Angelina eventually knows. He doesn't mean to tell her, but she has a way of pulling information out of him like a dentist extracting a tooth. Slow, methodical, and you don't realize it's gone until it's too late. If Angelina found out I co-owned a successful restaurant, she would find a way to weaponize it. She'd tell people I used Dominic's money. She'd question my qualifications. She'd try to get involved. So Dominic knew I helped Nina's restaurant with some startup cash. Maybe $10,000 or $15,000, he figured. A favor for a friend. He had no idea about the real number, the ownership stake, or the fact that Bellwood netted $387,000 in its first full fiscal year. My share after expenses, $193,500, more than Angelina's entire dry cleaning operation. Some women stress eat. I stress invest. I highly recommend it. Now, the dinner's set up. Angelina booked Bellwood 6 weeks in advance. She specifically requested the private alcove behind the stone archway. The best section in the restaurant, custom lighting, seats up to 10. She booked for 7 guests, not 8. I was not included in the reservation. She told me dinner was at 7:30. She told everyone else 7 o'clock. By the time I arrived, the table would be full, drinks flowing, and Angelina's story already set. June is late. June is disorganized. June doesn't prioritize family, but Angelina made one mistake. She made it a week before the dinner, and she made it through her own daughter, Kelsey Landry. Dominic's younger sister, 28, works in marketing. Called me on a Wednesday evening. She'd had 2 glasses of Pinot Grigio, which is exactly the amount it takes for Kelsey to start telling the truth. She told me that Angelina had invited Laura Reiterman to the dinner. Laura is the daughter of Angelina's college sorority sister. 30 years old, pharmaceutical sales rep out of Charlotte, blonde, polished, single. Angelina had been showing Dominic photos of Laura for months, dropping comments like, "Laura would fit right into this family, and she really understands how things work." Kelsey told me Laura would be seated next to Dominic. I hung up the phone and sat in my car in the driveway for 11 minutes. I counted every one. That wasn't all I'd been sitting on. 6 months earlier, I'd noticed irregularities in our joint checking account. Small deposits with no clear source. $1,200 here, $2,000 there. Followed by spending that didn't match Dominic's pay cycle. I do financial tracking for a living. You don't hide numbers from me the way you don't hide a steak from a bloodhound. I pulled 3 months of statements and found Venmo transfers from A. Landry. Over 18 months, $14,600. Not enormous amounts individually, but consistent. Every single transfer was a leash, and Kelsey confirmed it without realizing. She once mentioned that Angelina keeps a little notebook of everything she lends. She calls it her family ledger. My mother-in-law wasn't helping her son. She was financing his obedience. I never confronted Dominic. I documented everything. Dates, amounts, screenshots, and I waited. At the time, I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Now I knew. Saturday evening, I put on a navy dress I bought with my own money from a boutique on Augusta Street, did my own makeup, drove myself. On the way to Bellwood, I passed 2 of Angelina's dry cleaning shops. Same sign on both. Landry's. Trusted since 1994. I did the math while I drove. 31 years of dry cleaning, 12 months of Bellwood. My restaurant made more in 1 year than her shops made in 2. I pulled into the parking lot. Dominic's Chevy Traverse was already there. Angelina's silver Lexus was parked in a spot marked reserved. It's not reserved. She just parks there because she thinks presentation matters more than rules. My phone buzzed. A text from Nina. Your mother-in-law just sent back the bread basket because the butter wasn't room temperature. I'm gonna need you to come talk me down before I do something creative with a bread knife. I smiled, got out of the car, and walked toward the entrance of the restaurant I co-own, where my mother-in-law was waiting with a trap she'd spent 6 weeks building. She had no idea she'd built it on my land. The hostess that night was a girl named Bridget, 22, 3 weeks on the job, still learning the reservation software. She smiled at me the way new employees smile at everyone, pulled up the system and said, "Landry, party of 7. I'm sorry, I don't see an 8th guest on the reservation. It looks like the party is already seated and complete." I looked past Bridget's shoulder toward the private alcove. Through the stone archway, I could see everything. 7 place settings, 7 chairs. Dominic sat in the middle of the long side, and to his right was a woman I'd never met but immediately recognized from the photos Kelsey described, Laura Reiterman. She was leaning slightly toward my husband, laughing at something, one hand resting near the base of her wine glass. She looked exactly like the kind of woman Angelina would pick, polished, agreeable, the type who would never argue about a holiday card photo. Angelina sat at the head of the table. Of course she did. She was glowing. That particular glow she gets when she believes she's the most important person in the room. Kelsey was across from Laura, scrolling on her phone. Aunt Paula was chatting with 2 women I recognized as Angelina's friends from the Greenville Women's Business Association. The table was full. The wine was flowing. Everyone looked comfortable. There was no chair for me. That's when Angelina spotted me at the hostess stand. She didn't rush over. She strolled. That slow, deliberate walk she does when she already knows how the conversation is going to end. She reached me, tilted her head with that icy sweet smile, and said, loud enough for the 4 top nearby to hear, "Oh, June, I wasn't sure you'd come. You know, the specials tonight are in French. Maybe a cheap bar would be more your speed?" The 2 women at the 4 top glanced over. Bridget, the hostess, froze with her hand still on the reservation tablet. A busser walking past nearly dropped a water pitcher. You know what's funny? Angelina genuinely thought that was devastating. She thought mentioning French would make me feel small and uneducated. What she didn't know is that half the restaurants I negotiate supply contracts for have French-influenced menus, and I can read a prix-fixe listing faster than she can read her own dry cleaning invoices. But I didn't say that. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because in that moment, I was doing math. Not the emotional kind, the strategic kind. I looked past Angelina's shoulder again. I saw Lincoln Ferrara adjusting a centerpiece on a 2 top near the bar. Lincoln, the floor manager who was at every build-out meeting, every soft opening, every quarterly review. The man who calls me boss when no customers are around. He hadn't noticed me yet, but the second he did, one word from him would unravel everything. Then I looked at Dominic, my husband, sitting 15 feet away with another woman at his elbow in a restaurant his wife co-owns. And I could tell he'd seen me. He'd shifted in his chair the way he does when he's uncomfortable. That little adjustment, like the seat, suddenly got harder. He saw me standing at the hostess stand. He saw his mother walk over, and he didn't get up. That was the moment everything became clear. Not because of Angelina. I'd known who she was for years, but because of Dominic. My husband, who loves me, who I believe genuinely loves me, could not bring himself to stand up from a chair and walk 20 steps to stand next to his wife. His mother's gravity was stronger than his spine. I could have revealed everything right there. I could have asked Bridget to get Lincoln. I could have walked into the kitchen, come out with Nina, and watched Angelina's face collapse like a souffle in an earthquake. It would have felt incredible for about 90 seconds, but I don't operate on 90-second satisfaction. I learned that from my grandmother, who once had a meat supplier try to short her on a bulk ribeye order. She didn't confront him. She just quietly switched to his competitor the next week. The supplier lost Rosie's Diner as a client and spent 3 months trying to figure out why. Grandma Rosie told me, "Don't tell people they lost. Let them figure it out on their own. It stings longer." So I made my decision. I was not going to sit at that table. I was not going to cause a scene. I was going to let Angelina have her perfect evening. Every bite, every toast, every smug glance at Laura Reiderman. And then I was going to dismantle her world over the next 72 hours. I looked at Angelina and kept my voice even. "You're right," I said. "I must have gotten the time wrong. Enjoy your evening." Angelina's eyes lit up. She'd won. She thought she'd won. She gave me that little nod, the one she gives when she's confirmed something she already believed, and walked back to her table. I turned toward the exit. I took 4 steps. Then I turned left down the narrow corridor past the restrooms, the service hallway that leads to the back office, the hallway that only staff and owners know about. Bridget didn't see me turn. Angelina didn't look back. I walked into the office, my office, sat in the chair I'd picked out from a furniture liquidation sale in Charleston, opened my laptop and texted Nina one line: "Don't come out front. Come to the office. Bring the ownership binder." Nina replied in 4 seconds. "On my way. Should I spit in your mother-in-law's creme brulee?" I typed back, "No, I want her to enjoy every single bite. It's the last meal she'll ever eat here without knowing who owns the place." Nina came through the office door smelling like smoked paprika and barely contained fury. She still had her chef's coat on, a streak of something dark, probably the bourbon glaze, across one sleeve. She closed the door behind her, looked at me, and said, "Tell me everything. And tell me why I shouldn't go out there and personally introduce your mother-in-law to the walk-in freezer." I told her everything. Not emotionally. I couldn't afford emotions right now. I laid it out the way I'd lay out a supply chain problem at work. Here's the situation. Here are the variables. Here's what we're going to do about it. I had 3 objectives. Not for tonight, for the next 72 hours. Objective 1, the bill. Angelina booked the reservation in her own name. Her credit card was on file. She expected, like she always does, to orchestrate the evening and then split the check or have others contribute. That wasn't going to happen. I told Nina to let the dinner proceed normally. Full tasting menu, wine pairings, whatever Angelina ordered. And when the check came, it would go to one person, Angelina Landry, the full amount. I already knew roughly what the total would be. 7 guests, the tasting menu at $110 a head, plus wine pairings at $65 per person. Angelina had also ordered the Wagyu appetizer for the table, $68, and I knew from Nina's earlier text that they'd added a second bottle of the Willamette Valley Pinot Noir at $92. Throw in cocktails before dinner, tax, and the automatic 18% gratuity for parties over 6, and the total would land somewhere around $2,100, maybe a little more. That's a lot of dry cleaning revenue for one dinner. And here's the part that mattered. The check would come in a Bellwood-branded envelope, the same cream-colored heavy stock I'd selected when we designed the restaurant stationery, with my initials, JS, embossed in the corner, right next to Nina's. Angelina wouldn't notice that detail tonight. She'd be too busy performing for the table, but she'd notice it later. I'd make sure of that. Objective 2, the reveal. I wasn't going to call Angelina and announce my ownership. That would give her time to prepare, to spin, to build a counter-narrative. Angelina is many things, but she's not stupid. Give her 24 hours and she'll have a version of events where she's the victim. I couldn't allow that. Instead, on Monday morning, I would send a handwritten note to her home on Bellwood letterhead. Inside, a photocopy of the co-ownership certificate filed with the South Carolina Secretary of State, and 3 words: "Thank you for dining with us." No explanation, no lecture, no phone call, just the document and the silence. Let Angelina stare at my signature on that certificate and connect every dot herself. The realization would hit harder than any speech I could give. Objective 3, and this was the hardest one, Dominic. I opened my phone and showed Nina the bank statements. 18 months of Venmo transfers from A. Landry, $14,600. Nina stared at the screen, and her jaw did that thing where it tightens like she's biting down on something she wants to say but won't. Then she looked at me and said, "June, what are you going to do with this man?" I told her, "Not tonight. Dominic is sitting out there full of wine and guilt and his mother's influence. Confronting him now would be chaos. He'd get defensive, Angelina would somehow get involved, and the whole thing would become a shouting match where nothing gets resolved. I'd wait until Sunday morning. Sober, rested, no excuses. I'd lay out the statements, the screenshots, and a very clear set of conditions. Full financial transparency going forward. Repayment of the $14,600 from his own savings, not Angelina's money. Couples counseling starting within 2 weeks, and a face-to-face conversation with Angelina about boundaries. with me in the room. If he refused any of it, I had a family attorney's number saved in my phone, a name Nina's cousin had recommended 3 months ago, back when I first found the transfers, and wasn't sure where this was all heading. This wasn't a bluff, and it wasn't a threat. It was a deadline. While Nina and I talked, the dinner continued in the alcove. Lincoln came back to the office once, quietly, and gave me an update. Angelina was having the time of her life. She'd ordered a second round of appetizers for the table on her card. She was telling everyone how she'd discovered this restaurant before it became impossible to get into. You know, the way people discover things other people built. Like Columbus discovering a continent full of people who were already there. Laura Reiterman was still seated next to Dominic, but Kelsey had repositioned herself between them and was asking Laura increasingly specific questions about how she knew the family. God bless Kelsey. She was doing her own quiet work without anyone asking her to. Before Nina went back to the kitchen, she offered one last thing. She wanted to personally prepare the dessert course for the Landry table, her signature bourbon pecan tart, a recipe we'd developed together over 3 weekends of testing in my home kitchen last spring, burning through 4 pounds of pecans and 2 bottles of Maker's Mark before we got the caramel ratio right. Angelina would eat it. She'd probably call it the best dessert she'd ever had. And later, when she found out who created that recipe, the sweetness would turn bitter in her memory. Nina called it culinary karma. I called it petty. We agreed it was both. After Nina left, I sat alone in the office for a minute. On the desk, there's a framed photo of Nina and me on opening night. Standing in the empty dining room, the tables set but no guests yet, both of us grinning like idiots. Next to it, a smaller frame. Grandma Rosie behind the counter at the diner in Odessa, 1987. Flour on her apron, a calculator in her hand, smiling at someone off camera. I looked at that photo and whispered, "Watch this, Grandma." Out in the dining room, Lincoln brought the check in the Bellwood envelope. Angelina slid her card in without looking at the total. She'd look at her credit card statement on Monday. By then, she'd have already opened my letter. Sunday morning. I was already sitting at the kitchen table when Dominic came downstairs at 8:15. Coffee was made. His mug was out, and next to it, fanned across the table like a poker hand, were 18 months of bank statements, with every transfer from A. Landry highlighted in yellow. Dominic stopped in the doorway. He looked at the papers. He looked at me, and I could see the exact moment he understood that this wasn't going to be a normal Sunday. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I pointed to the chair across from me and said, "Sit down. We need to talk about $14,600. He sat. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. The numbers were right there in his mother's own name. He tried to explain. Angelina offered the money during tight months. She said it was just family helping family. She made him feel like refusing would be an insult, like he was rejecting her love. He never asked for it. She offered, every time. But he also never said no, and he never told me. For 1.5 years, he accepted his mother's money and hid it from the woman he sleeps next to every night. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "How long have you known?" 6 months, I told him. I've known for 6 months. I watched him accept money from his mother for half a year and said nothing, because I wanted to see if he'd ever tell me on his own. He didn't. I laid out the conditions. I didn't frame them as a request. Full financial transparency. Every account, every balance, every transaction, open book from now on. The $14,600 gets repaid from his personal savings, not Angelina's money replacing Angelina's money, his own. Couples counseling, first appointment within 2 weeks, and a face-to-face conversation with his mother about boundaries at our kitchen table. With me present, no phone calls, no private side conversations, no letting Angelina rewrite the story. I told him I had a family attorney's number saved in my phone. I told him the name. I told him I'd called her office on Thursday to confirm availability. This was not an emotional outburst. This was a plan. Dominic sat with it. He didn't argue. He didn't make excuses. He looked at the highlighted statements, looked at me, and said, "I'll call the counselor tomorrow morning." I nodded. It wasn't a resolution. It was a starting line. And I made clear, starting was the minimum. Following through was what would save this marriage. Monday morning, a Bellwood courier I'd arranged through Lincoln delivered a cream-colored envelope to Angelina's front door at 9 a.m. Inside, a photocopy of the co-ownership certificate. My name, my signature, my investment stake, filed with the South Carolina Secretary of State 22 months ago, and on a separate card, 3 handwritten words, "Thank you for dining with us." I know exactly what happened next because Kelsey told me that evening, and Kelsey had been at Angelina's house when the envelope arrived. Angelina opened it at her kitchen island. She read the certificate once, then again. Then she sat down. Then she pulled up her credit card app on her phone and found the charge from Saturday night, $2,147. Then she Googled Bellwood Greenville owners. Nothing came up because I'm a silent partner, and Nina is the only public face. Then Angelina called Nina's restaurant line. Nina didn't pick up. Then she called Dominic. For the first time in his adult life, Dominic saw his mother's name on the screen and did not answer. Kelsey said Angelina sat at that kitchen island for 45 minutes without speaking. By Tuesday, Angelina tried to control the damage. She called Aunt Paula with her version. June had somehow wormed her way into a restaurant investment, probably using Dominic's money. But Paula already knew the real story. Kelsey had told her everything Sunday night. Paula listened to Angelina's entire speech, then said something Angelina had never heard from a family member before. "Angie, I think you need to sit this one out." Angelina hung up. She called 2 cousins. Same polite distance. The truth had already moved through the family the way truth always moves in a small city. Not through malice, but through gravity. Kelsey told 2 people. Paula mentioned it at her Tuesday book club. Lincoln staff talked to other restaurant workers. In Greenville, a story this good doesn't need anyone to push it. It rolls downhill on its own. Then there was Laura Reiterman. Kelsey reached out to her directly, not to attack, but to explain. She told Laura the real situation, that Dominic's marriage was not basically over, that the seating arrangement was orchestrated, that Laura had been invited as a prop in Angelina's campaign to replace me. Laura's reaction wasn't anger at me. It was fury at Angelina, who had fed her a completely false story and used her as a pawn. Laura sent Angelina a short text. Kelsey showed me a screenshot later that said, "I won't be attending any more family events. Please don't contact me again." Then she blocked Angelina's number. In the span of 1 week, Angelina Landry lost her financial leverage over Dominic. She lost control of the family narrative. She lost her hand-picked replacement for me. And she lost the ability to call me a diner girl ever again. Because the diner girl built a restaurant that makes more in 12 months than Angelina's dry cleaning chain makes in 2 years. Wednesday evening, Angelina sat alone in her living room. On the coffee table, the Bellwood co-ownership certificate on cream cardstock, and a credit card statement showing a $2,147 charge. Her phone was silent. Nobody was calling. 2 weeks later, Dominic and I sat in a therapist's office on East Washington Street in downtown Greenville. 3rd session. Beige couch, box of tissues on the side table that neither of us had touched yet. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Annette Sorensen, who looked like she'd heard worse things than our story before lunch, asked Dominic what had changed. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. He said he'd spent his entire adult life thinking his mother's approval was the same thing as safety. That every time she offered money, it felt like proof she cared. And every time he took it, he felt a little smaller. But the smallness was familiar, and familiar felt safe. He said he realized, sitting at that table at Bellwood with Laura Reiterman next to him and his wife standing at the hostess stand, that he had chosen comfortable shame over uncomfortable honesty, and that when he saw me turn and walk away without crying, without yelling, without giving his mother the reaction she wanted, he understood he'd married someone who operates on a level he hadn't earned the right to stand on yet. I didn't cry, I nodded. There was a long way to go. The boundary conversation with Angelina happened 4 days after our second counseling session. At our kitchen table, not hers, not a restaurant, not neutral ground, our ground. Angelina arrived stiff. Her posture was perfect, the way it always is when she's preparing for battle. She'd probably rehearsed her defense the entire drive over. I could almost see the talking points behind her eyes. Dominic spoke first. He told his mother he was repaying every dollar she'd lent him, $14,600 from his own savings account. He told her she was welcome at holidays, birthdays, and family gatherings, but she would never again comment on June's background, her career, her family, or her worth. Not to her face, not behind her back, not to other family members. If she did, she would not be invited back. He wasn't angry. He wasn't cruel. He was clear. And clarity, I've learned, is the one thing controlling people cannot tolerate. Angelina tried to argue. She said she was just looking out for her son. She said any mother would do the same. Dominic looked at her and said, "You weren't looking out for me. You were making sure I couldn't leave, and I let you do it for 33 years." Angelina left without finishing her coffee. She didn't slam the door. She just walked out, got in her silver Lexus, and drove away. Sometimes the loudest exit is a quiet one. 3 weeks after the dinner, Nina and I finalized a deal with a local farm cooperative in Travelers Rest for exclusive seasonal produce, a contract I negotiated using my distribution network contacts. Bellwood was booked solid through the next quarter. A food writer from the Charleston Post and Courier reached out about a feature piece. My $52,000 investment had generated over $200,000 in returns in under 2 years. Every dollar of it was mine. Every decision was mine. Kelsey started coming around more, not dramatically, not as some grand rebellion against her mother, just naturally, the way relationships shift when the pretending stops. We went to the Saturday farmers market on Main Street together. She bought overpriced lavender honey, and I bought heirloom tomatoes for Nina's new appetizer. Kelsey mentioned she was thinking about starting a small online business selling handmade candles. I offered to look at her numbers. It was the first time anyone in the Landry family had treated me like a resource instead of a guest. And here's the quiet irony that I think about sometimes. One of Angelina's dry cleaning shops, the location on Lawrence Road, the oldest one, started losing customers. Not because of me. Not because of anything I did. A new competitor opened 2 blocks away with better prices and same-day service. Angelina, who spent 3.5 years mocking my grandmother's little diner, was now dealing with the exact same small business pressures Grandma Rosie navigated for 4 decades. The difference is that Rosie adapted. Rosie survived. Rosie built something that outlasted her. I'm not sure Angelina knows how to do any of those things when she can't control the outcome. It was a Tuesday morning, 4 weeks after the dinner. I was in the Bellwood office with Nina, reviewing the seasonal menu for next month. We were arguing about whether to keep the smoked trout appetizer or replace it with a roasted beet salad, the kind of argument that ends with both of us tasting 6 versions and agreeing on a 7th. My phone buzzed. A text from Lincoln at the front. "New reservation just came in. You're going to want to see this." I opened the booking system on my laptop, and there it was. Angelina Landry, party of 1, Saturday, 7 p.m. I stared at the screen. Nina looked over my shoulder. She raised one eyebrow, that slow, deliberate eyebrow she reserves for moments that are either terrible or perfect. I confirmed the reservation, assigned it the best table in the house, the one by the window with the view of the courtyard garden I designed with the landscaper last spring. I didn't add a note. I didn't call Angelina. I just confirmed it, closed the laptop, and went back to arguing about the beet salad, because that's what owners do. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. If you love this story, more of my best ones are already on your screen. Just tap, and I'll meet you right there. See you in the next one.